Teachers of Reddit, what the worst thing that happened on a school trip? Story 1. This happened just the other week. We had left the school about 5 minutes before on the bus, when a student got my attention and said, "Miss, someone hit a girl in the head with a bottle and she's crying." I think here we go and head down the back to settle them down. I get there, students all looking on and crowding on, and sure enough, the girl is in tears and is holding her hand against her head. I ask, "Are you okay?" And she pulled her hand away from her head and it was gushing blood. We turned the bus around and she ended up going to hospital. Long story short, head wounds bleed a lot, 12-year-olds make bad decisions, and everyone was okay in the end. Can't say I felt overly prepared for that though. Story 2. We went skating, and one of the students fell, smacked her chin off the ice, and somehow got a skate blade to the face. She needed a bunch of stitches, and was able to stick her tongue through the hole in her face. Story 3. Ask my students to be respectful of other pedestrians while on the trip, because some people want to enjoy the nature center by themselves. One kid saw a woman with her service dog and tried to pull on it because "Mommy would let me have it." We had to leave because of that, and he ruined the entire trip for everyone. Story 4. My boyfriend was a teacher and his students went on the annual DC trip. It was like 2 kids to each hotel room or something, and there was 2 14-year-old boys that shared a room. One of the boys jacked off into a pillow, and then hit the other kid in the face with the cum pillow. Story 5. Former assistant teacher here, we were on a 6th grade field trip to the Franklin Institute in Philadelphia. Cool place. So, at the time one of the attractions was a sort of centripetal force machine that you can sit in and get swung around. Poor explanation, but imagine the Gravitron only smaller and faster with seats and no walls. I googled it but can't find the ride, guessing it was swapped out for something else. Well, one dumbass kid thought it'd be funny to show off and see what happens when you undo your seatbelt while riding. Naturally, he got flung out of the machine at roughly half the speed of sound and broke his fall with nothing but his face. Glasses busted, massive concussion, totally wrecked. There was a whole investigation and the teacher in charge of that kids group had to actually defend himself from accusations that he could have somehow stopped that level of stupidity. Sadly I didn't witness it but did hear the impact from one room over. Pretty interesting day. Story 6. I was a new teacher when the whole grade went on a field trip during the first week of school. In fact, I was so new that nobody, not even my colleagues, noticed that I wasn't on the bus. So it left without me. Fortunately, the destination was only about 15 minutes away, so it wasn't a big deal for me to jump in my car and follow the bus there. Story 7. Kids were going to a conference for a leadership/service-oriented club. They got brought home early because a chaperone found an orgy in one of the rooms that had been pre-planned in a group chat that almost all of the kids on the trip were in. Story 8. A club at my high school had a conference that lasted from Friday morning to Sunday afternoon in a city about an hour's drive away. Due to poor planning, the club's teacher sponsor could only stick around for the first day, and the other faculty member that got to come wasn't so enthusiastic about doing so. On Friday night the students promised the chaperone they'd just be popping down to the restaurant across the street from the hotel. Most ended up at a Hooters. Someone was supposed to get a birthday lap dance, and the ones who weren't feeling that disappeared and were later found eating dinner at a bar. Mind, none of these kids were even 18. I'm pretty sure they didn't have any supervision that night at the hotel either. The next day the principal found out what happened and came up to chaperone the kids and keep the other chaperone in line. The hotel was a cool 8 to 10 blocks away from the conference, another stroke of poor planning, and this all happened during the coldest, windiest weekend of the year, and everyone ended up having to walk back and forth a bunch of times each day wearing nice, not so warm clothes. So now there's a rule that students have to stay in the same hotel that's hosting an out-of-town conference, and have to stay inside the building unless accompanied by a chaperone. Story 9. I went on a class trip as chaperone to a science center. I was in charge of a group of 8 boys. One of them goes missing. I asked the others where he went, and they don't know either. He's missing for about 10 minutes until a security guard from the center comes up to me with him. The guy asks, "Is he one of yours?" and tells this kid to open his backpack when I say yes. Probably $200 worth of stolen stuff in there. He spent the rest of the trip right next to me. Story 10. I am a teacher, but my anecdote comes from when I was a kid back in the mid-90s. We were visiting some museum in London and were traveling on the train and the tube with teachers. On the way back, some students didn't get on the tube before the automatic doors shut and the teacher in charge just yelled as loud as he could, "See you back at school, lads." And we just went home and the teacher waited at the school later on, and sure enough, about 40 minutes after everyone else got back, the remaining kids turned up. If that happened to me now as a teacher in 2019, I'd be fired. Probably out of a cannon into an abyss marked RIP career. If you made it this far, please consider pressing the subscribe and like button. Now continue to the video. Story 11. Back in 2009, I went to Obama's inauguration with my parents, friend at the time, and business law elective teacher. The teacher was this great, excitable guy I'm still pretty close to, absolutely one of my favorite high school teachers. Anyway, my dad and my friend got off the metro at a stop that was about 3 mishandlings away from a human crush, and my mom and my teacher and I got whisked off to God knows where a few stops down. We had brought walkie-talkies with us and managed to find each other again after a little while, but that was a crazy fun day. Story 12. In the kindergarten field trip, we had the parent of our most challenging student come along as a chaperone. Her group was her own son and a very sweet, obedient girl. Let's call him Jim and the girl Shonda. Typically, we teachers set up base camp while the parents take the groups of students through the park. We do a scavenger hunt, and the parents bring us their cards for a stamp as they go through each section. The first time the zoo employee brought us Jim, he said that the boy was in the monkey exhibit trying to climb over the fences. Luckily, he had on a school shirt, and Jim was brought right to us. We called his mother's phone, and she didn't answer. About 15 minutes later, the mom shows up and says, "Jim, how did you get in front of us? We were walking together just a minute ago." We teachers explained that in fact, Jim had been with us for a bit, and the zoo ranger had brought him over. No real response once from the mom. We asked her to turn on her phone. They went off again. The second time they brought us Jim, he had gotten into the fountain. It had taken several employees to chase him down as he ran and giggled. Same drill, we called Mom. No answer. Jim was sopping wet with gross fountain water. He did not seem too concerned. The mom did not show up for 45 minutes. Again she said, "Jim, how did you get in front of us? We were walking together just a minute ago." This time I was watching Shonda. The look on that little girl's face said it all. Total amazement that an adult was lying. They went off again to walk to the picnic area. Yes. The third time the zoo brought back little Jim, it was with a police officer. Apparently, the zoo was watching the cameras, and the minute the mom was out of sight, she let go of Jim and basically ditched him. The mom got a citation for failure to maintain responsibility for her child and a 1-year ban from the zoo. The police officer accompanied her and Jim back to the buses and waited with them until it was time to leave. They did not participate in the picnic. Shonda had the best moral to the story. No wonder he is so bad, his mama won't even keep him safe when there is a tiger around. He is now a very troubled 4th grader. He doesn't get to go on field trips without one-on-one support from a school staff member. Story 13. We had to take a parenting class when we were in the process of getting custody of my husband's little sisters. The bar is really low. Sad face. Some of the main points I remember were refrigerate milk and meat, try to find some form of discipline that doesn't involve hitting your kids. This one seemed to really confuse most of the parents, and how to talk to / soothe your child when they are upset. That one got a lot of blank looks too. Regular meals, don't be a Disneyland dad, try to provide adequate seasonal clothing. During a break, the instructor came over to us wanting to know why we were even there. I explained it was a custody thing. But some of the other parents there, damn. When we talked about grounding for discipline, making your kid a cup of tea and sitting and talking with them, brushing their hair because it can be soothing, including them in the grocery shopping, and helping them learn cooking skills, People were looking at us like we were insane. Some of them were glaring. I had no idea there were so many kids growing up in homes where nobody knew how to look after small humans. Story 14. I remember my kindergarten trip to the zoo. My great-aunt was in town and went as a special chaperone. Well, our trip was each class stayed together and each class had about 4 or 5 chaperones. I think it was about 4 kids to every 1 adult or so on average. While my aunt, my friend and I were all looking at the elephants and talking and having a good time. The next thing we know, us 3 are standing there alone. My aunt was older, so she was in no hurry to try and find the rest of the group. So basically me and my friend got to see exactly what we wanted, instead of what the class had planned. We met back up at the picnic area for lunch and rejoined them then. From what I remember, it was a fun trip. Story 15. I took 3 classes of 6th graders, age 11 to 12, to visit the Los Angeles County Museum of Art. We'd come from about an hour and a half away, the kids and other teachers on buses, but since I was hugely pregnant I was allowed to drive my own car. It had been raining, but I arrived a bit ahead of the bus, so when the kids got off I was there to lead them to the museum. As I began walking towards the kids getting off the buses, I noticed a lot of papers on the sidewalk, and suddenly realized that they were an assortment of extremely pornographic pictures. I stopped to try to gather them up before the kids got an unexpected and completely inappropriate sex ed lesson. We'd already had a big talk about being mature when viewing classical art, e.g. nude statues, OMG, but we were not prepared for the most lurid corn LA had to offer. Unfortunately, the rain had plastered the papers to the sidewalk, and the sight of the very pregnant teachers scrambling on hands and knees on Wilshire Boulevard sent the chaperones and teachers rushing to my aid, with 100 kids right after them, no matter how urgently I tried to wave them back. It was memorable. Story 16. I'm an English teacher in Korea and field trips are different here. Usually, there are no additional chaperones. The teacher is responsible for all 25-ish students in their homeroom class during the trip. That means a field trip is often 8 classes of 25 students, 200 kids. And a maximum of 10 chaperones if some office staff get taken along. One of my first trips was to a large traditional market. It's a popular place to go and there are usually thousands of people there at all times. Our buses arrived and we all piled off in the parking lot. The kids were told via megaphone, "Be back here in 1 hour. Go!" And all 200 of them scattered into the crowds and tents while most of the teachers got back onto the buses to have coffee. Surprisingly, 99% of the kids were back on the buses when they were supposed to be. However, a good number had bought small hamsters, turtles, or goldfish. 2 weeks later, I couldn't find a single kid whose spontaneous pet was still alive. Story 17. A girl on a beta club trip thought it would be funny to put bomb on board in the window of the bus. The interstate was shut down, the bus was pulled over and SWAT team raided the bus. The bomb squad was called in to sweep the bus even though the girl admitted it was a hoax. She didn't go to jail somehow, she was also a popular cheerleader and didn't get any disciplinary action from the school. Story 18. At my high school, just a few years ago, it was tradition for the football team to go to morning mass during school hours to pray the morning before a football game. This wasn't sanctioned by the school, and they were officially supposed to be marked tardy, but if they weren't too late and were good kids, teachers would often look the other way. However, some people got to take advantage of this. There was one situation in which 2 girls who were late came in at the exact same time. One was a cheerleader, the other wasn't. They had to stop at the attendance office. The non-cheerleader girl was given a tardy slip and sent to class. Then, the administrator asked the cheerleader how mass was. The cheerleader explained that she didn't go to mass that morning, she was just tardy. However, she was still sent to class without being marked tardy, even though she didn't even have mass as an excuse, but even if she did, it's not supposed to make a difference. Story 19. Group trip to take a tour of a college campus. We had a young man jump out of a bus window while it was going down the highway. His long-term girlfriend had broken up with him a few days before, and he later explained that he didn't see the point of going on the college visit anymore because he didn't want to go to the same college as her, or even apply to the same ones. Denied up and down that it was a suicide attempt. His friends circled the wagons and supported his story, and the story/rumors died quickly. He got some gnarly road rash, but avoided being hit by any cars. I always got the impression that it was, in fact, a suicide attempt. If he didn't want to go on the tour, why go at all? Why board the bus? He could have stayed at school. This was several years ago. He is fine. Story 20. Van trip to Disney World. Lead bus driver knew a shortcut. This led to 5 large motorcoaches lost in an orange grove somewhere near Orlando. No idea how much damage we did to those trees. The roads really weren't designed for huge buses. Story 21. When I was in the AmeriCorps, I was a tutor at a school where a popular 7th grader drowned on the class's end of the year field trip to a lake at a state park the summer before I started. There were no lifeguards on duty. He was in chest-deep water when he went under in the lake and never came up. His friends and the chaperones tried to find him, but by the time they did, it was too late. This was an underserved school in a really rough neighborhood. According to the teachers, things were getting better at the school, but this really bucked with the kids. It was a very challenging year for them. Story 22. My little sister had a classmate drown on a school club trip to Germany. Every year our local high school's German club raises money to go to Germany during the summer for a couple weeks. It's always low-key wild, kids getting drunk, trying drugs, getting laid, etc. But generally the kids are pretty respectful and don't go overboard, mainly because the German teacher is known to laid back but will be a hard ass and send you back home via plane immediately if you majorly buck up. This kid was super shy and well-liked and was apparently really opening up on the trip. He was convinced by a couple of girls in the group to go swimming in a local lake. But when he jumped off the dock to join them, he hit his head on a rock and died. It really messed everyone up. Story 23. It happened right before we would enter the bus. My students had been waiting for a few minutes and some guys were messing around. I warned them to act normal but left them out of my sight for 1 minute to grab something from my postbox. In that time they pressed the fire alarm. The whole school, 1650 students, had to be evacuated to the car park where the bus also waited. It was not my favorite morning. Story 24. Obligatory not a teacher, but when my econ class went to NYC for a field trip, one of my classmates tried to buy weed off a guy in an alleyway. Turned out to be an undercover cop. We were the honors class. He was a cool kid. I was walking to school in freezing weather one day and he offered me a ride. Don't remember what happened to him after that. I know he didn't graduate with us that year. Story 25. Not a teacher, but I've got one from my college days. Our history class had gone to see a Civil War battlefield. One of the trails my professor wanted to go on was blocked off by a wire fence and marked as unsafe. The professor just looked at a hole in the fence, looked back at the class, and said if they didn't want people going in, they wouldn't have left a convenient human-sized hole there. And let us all through. We walked down through the trail, had a good discussion and a couple pictures. But when we got back, a park ranger was there chewing out the teaching assistant who stayed by the bus. He let us go with a warning, but stalked us in a ranger vehicle the rest of the day. Story 26. Not a teacher, but in 4th grade a turkey flew through the windshield of the bus. We were driving through the middle of nowhere on our way to a farm or something, don't remember what it was supposed to be because we just ended up going back to the school. Some teachers near the front were picking glass out of their forehead, think the driver was mostly okay but still needed to get checked out. I don't think any of us kids were hurt at all. Maybe we were too short at that age for the glass to make its way over the seats enough to actually maim anyone? I have no idea. But yeah, a teacher kicked the dead bird off the bus, did a quick head count, fluttered over the bus driver, and then we just lined up against a wooden fence at the edge of someone's property while waiting for another bus to come get us. Lots of crazy shit went down at my school throughout my entire 12 years, but I think this is the only thing that happened on a trip. Oh, besides a couple of guys popping some sort of pills while at a Rangers game at the end of the year in 7th grade. They started the next school year in what's basically a pre-juvie kind of setting. That was wild, mostly because I didn't expect these particular guys to do that sort of thing, especially at that age. Story 27. I wasn't a teacher, but I was a junior. Mostly we did nothing and had no real authority, but when it came time for the big summer trip to an amusement park, suddenly me and another JR counselor were saddled with watching a group of 8 kids for the day with no adult. Everything went better than expected until the end of the day when we were trying to corral our group to leave. They didn't want to go, so they jumped in line for the sightseeing ride and got on before we could stop them. It was basically a slowly rotating observation room that went up a tall tower, stopped a while, then came back down. It got stuck halfway back down while we were frantically trying to find a real adult to let them know what happened. This was before cell phones were common, so I waited at the ride while my co-JR counselor went to find someone from our group. It kept us from leaving for an additional half hour to an hour while they got it unstuck. The counselors got in trouble for letting 2 13-year-olds escort a group alone, and I stopped going to the camp a week later because the other counselors started bullying me in retaliation.